Hi, I'm Brandon Briscoe, and welcome to another episode of The Postscript, Living Faith Bible Institute's weekly podcast and YouTube series devoted to interviewing pastors and professors from Living Faith Fellowship and LFBI. Every week, we come together talking about just a wide array of topics. Sometimes it's theological, sometimes it's ministry related, leadership related, sometimes we're talking about history or whatever it might be. But this week we're going to be talking about something I think that is very unique to the show. We haven't really had a conversation like this, and it probably relates most closely to the idea of missions. And that's, how do we reach Latinos in our communities? What does it look like for us to see beyond our cultural sphere and get beyond that and reach the people in our community that are speaking Spanish? There are so many Spanish speakers in the United States. In fact, there's 63.5 million Spanish speakers in the United States and Puerto Rico. That's a huge number of people, and so much opportunity exists there for us to reach the nations, to live the Great Commission towards these people, if we're willing to go and we're willing to learn their culture, and we're willing to bridge that gap. It's a big deal, and we should all be taking it seriously, whether we live in an urban setting or a rural setting or whatever it might be. So I have the privilege today of interviewing my friend that's a pastor here at Midtown Baptist Temple, Pastor Will Mata. He is the pastor of the Spanish-speaking ministry here at the church, Clase Hispania, and he also is working at translating content for LFBI into Spanish so that Spanish speakers, both here in the U.S. but also abroad, can get cheap and easy access to discipleship material so that they can grow in their faith and that they can multiply the work of the gospel in their communities. This is a big deal for the Bible Institute. And so it's a privilege for me to have him with us today. And with that, I want to introduce my friend, Pastor Will Mata.
How are you, man?
It's so good to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's very intimidating just being here, man, after so many episodes and having a good time with you guys. So yeah, thank you for the invitation.
So you listen to the show?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I've wanted you to be on. I've wanted to do this episode with you for months and months and months. So I'm glad to finally get you.
There you go.
Here.
So we're
You're
here
a busy
together.
man.
No, it's okay. Yeah, we're busy, but I think our church need to hear this a little bit. So it's going to be a good time. Yeah.
Now you do your own show. You've got a show that you do that's kind of like this on the local Spanish television station.
Yeah, it's the result of this show. Basically, I thought, man, I think we need some sort of way to communicate what's happening not only in MBT but in Kansas City and what our church is doing with the Hispanic community. So I'm like, I was praying, man, and we had a chance to. Or a door open basically in Televida, which is the channel, this Kansas City Spanish show, whatever. Yeah. And they just open the door and they do everything for us, and we just have to show up, record, and let it go.
And it's kind of like a Bible Q&A conversation
correct.
thing.
Yeah, it's very friendly. The audience that we're targeting is not a believer, but as a result of that, we have some visitors and salvation. So praise God, man.
Very cool.
Correct.
So this is, we're going to have a lot to talk about in our episode today. I want to make sure we have time to cover all of it. But as we usually do on the postscript, whenever we have a new guest, we want to hear their salvation story. We want to hear about how they came to know Christ. And I've heard your story several times, and I think it'll be a blessing for the audience to hear kind of how you came to where you're at now. So can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, man. Definitely grew up in a Christian home. Technically, obviously it was a little bit probably dysfunctional, at the time. I think times changed now, but.
And you were in Costa Rica. Yeah,
Costa Rica in 1997. So 44 years old. But like the gospel came early to our house with obviously different. Ways for us to understand fully what really that means. So it was more like a religion type thing. You're following the religion of your parents, which I believe that happens a lot here. But God captured my heart around 7 years old. But then it was a season because I was sexually abused when I was like in kinder. So I was struggling my whole childhood just figure out like who I was,
Yeah, that's
because
tough.
that event happened, and so I was doubting the why, why things happened to me, and seeing things different, in the lens of like, is that normal or no? But I can say that caused some rebellion in me. So then I think at the age of 11 and 12, I started going off and just trying things very early.
Yeah.
Alcohol, drugs, and loss of my identity, and just finding my identity in the world and
Right.
the lost world, and just got rebellion. And at the age of the 22, I was confronted again with the gospel, and that's when I choose to basically, follow the Lord. I mean, it's a long story, but
Yeah.
Being sexual abuse was a point in my life, because now it helped me to understand reconciliation, that is necessary, have grace. People lost things, but then just have passion for people, just, which, by the way, in Latin America, sexual abuse is like almost 99%. Like, every house has one of those cases, and
Wow.
A lot of families. So it's just one of those things, that-
So it's a fairly common thing from where you come from, but it doesn't make it any less horrendous. It really impacted you, left a scar.
No, man, it makes you honestly understand the urgency of the gospel.
Yeah.
Because it's a thing in our culture that we all struggle with some of that in our families, And
But man, that testimony and being able to talk about that is a big deal. One of the things that comes up from time to time on the show, especially when we're talking about leadership, is how suffering is such a critical aspect of growing in your faith, that so many leaders have some sort of strong moment or experience of suffering that was transformative, that they had to find Christ in the midst of. And man, that sounds like that God came and met you.
Yep. And it's the suffering of Jesus Christ, man. If that doesn't capture your heart, I understood very quick that my suffering was just a step to a redemption, start my life. And it was 1 Corinthians 10:13 was the verse that really kicks in my heart very quick. I'm like, I think I can do this. I mean, the things that happened to me, God had my back,
Yeah.
It was...
So how did you end up in the States?
Man, I was sent to Illinois through it was a mix of three churches, was sent to Illinois to start a Hispanic ministry. And, that's how everything started. I was a single man. I proposed 7 times, married. I got rejected each one until I found my beautiful Nailene. And, it was hard. I just thought that I was going to be single. So I sold everything, moved to Illinois, and I found my half, and that's how everything started in Illinois. Yeah, it was.
So you were in Illinois reaching out to Latinos in the community that you were in. What was that like? How long were you there?
Well, it was 6 months.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be longer, but there's a lot of things and that God used, and then it was just 6 months. At that time, my visa was not up to renew, so I returned to Costa Rica. But it was different, man. I understood very quick that Hispanic people or Latin America culture is really 1,000 cultures into one. And maybe the same thing happened in the United States with different states, but man, I quickly understood that, okay, I need to have a heart for these nations, because even we speak Spanish, we all speak Spanish, but there's a lot of context.
Your experience was with Costa Ricans, that was your culture, and then to meet Guatemalans and Hondurans,
and Mexicans,
and each one has a different way of living and different perspective, and so now you've got to bridge all those gaps. It's like asking a white person to understand every white person. It's not really that easy because you've got people from different cultures all over the world that may have the same skin tone and maybe even speak the same language. But
it's getting exposed, man. It's like, oh, okay, so I do not have heart for Latinos. So being in Illinois was that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, I thought I have a heart, but I'm like, this is different. I mean, it's a show, man. It's just like every culture is very strong, has an opinion, and so then you have to put all that together to really have a heart. So.
Right. Yeah.
But it was a good training. It was a lot of suffering too.
Yeah. So, over time, you and Nailene made your way back to Kansas City. You live here. You've been at Midtown Baptist Temple for how long now? Have you been?
It's been 7 years, 8 years, 7 years, yeah.
And you are the pastor over our Spanish-speaking class here at the church. And so that's been a huge, huge blessing to us. And, you mentioned gaining a heart for Latinos and that you had to learn how to have that heart. Can you express what that heart looks like now? Like, how has God changed that? And how have you come to realize that you actually desire and that you've been called to do this work?
Yeah, no, it's that desire that people come to United States seeking some type of peace, some type of, I don't know, even entertainment, this American dream, that I call, and I'm like, oh man, it's totally wrong, because when you come with that expectation, you very quick know that the American dream is just that you work so much that you want to go sleep early and that there's no time to do ministry. It's so knowing that, and reasons why people move to America is like, oh wow, man, yeah, we need to educate these people, because it's almost like those goals and those the vision that these people have when they come, it just go to the trash very quick, because it's like it's not what they think, it's not what America sell. It's this fake of happiness, and I always go to Hebrews 12:14. That is one of the verses that God used, in terms of me reaching Latinos. That says, "Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man should see the Lord." And it's like, if we're not following, that peace that we need with all men, means integrate the gospel, through the world, then that happiness, that holiness, is just going to be, a way. It's just that no way for us to reach people. So
and so it sounds to me that part of your heart and part of your vision is to find the people who have already recognized that the American dream is actually just kind of a mirage or an illusion.
Correct.
And they're maybe sad or disheartened or just busying themselves in life, trying to distract themselves. You're finding those people and preaching the gospel. Yeah,
no, and again, it is based in that verse. If I'm following that piece, I know people will see that. The problem is, people is moving here, even with the gospel. There's a bunch of believers that are moving, and God is bringing internationals. And I don't want to talk just about Latinos, but just in general. And if I'm not engaged with the mission, then means nothing for them. They have to see a reality of Christ in us. So,
man. Well, we're going to talk in today's episode. I want to dig in deep there, because I think what our audience needs to hear, as a lot of the churches in the fellowship and a lot of the students in LFBI have a heart for the nations. And yet so many of us struggle to even reach the internationals that are in our community. There's people right in front of us, and we're failing to find them and meet them and introduce them to the gospel. And yet we have these ambitions to reach the world. And so I think it's really important. And I want to pick your brain about how to reach Latinos. But before we do, you're also, helping LFBI big time with this new project of translating our content into Spanish, whether it be you're lecturing or actually just translating verbatim over the top of lectures. But it's been a tough work, but it's been good.
Yeah.
So, tell us where we're at.
No, we were able to do Foundations 2 and 3. And we're working in Genesis, and there's some other classes that we're thinking. But man, it's hard work, because until you find those faithful men who can translate and teach, which that happened in Foundations 3, that we were able to integrate a couple more men, but it's just a lot of work, but it's necessary. I mean, if we want to stand up on the throne of God, hearing everyone and, from every language, like Revelation 7, then we must do this. It's just translating, man, is necessary. It's very hard to be in a country that is not your country, technically, when people is moving here. And have the desire to know what's going on in that particular church and this setup of people, and not being able to get full proof, and that's my heart. That's where my heart is heavy right now, because I'm like, man, you see MBT, and we got all this structure, and everyone have access.
Yeah.
And man, we're with D1 or the discipleship one in Spanish that we finally did, and we're getting a hold of that. But it's like, well, after that, what's next? So that motivation is what's in my heart. I'm like, man, we need to put more out there. So
yeah.
But we need faithful men. That's the hard part.
Yeah, and it is a big deal, and the LFBI team realizes it as well, that it's not right. It's not right that every language should have this content.
Yeah.
And so there's a heartbeat to get all 60 credit hours of LFBI into Spanish, so that the Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters can get everything that they need to get. It's a huge deal. We're already thinking about, Vietnamese and other languages, but it takes a lot of manpower and resources. And even right now, we're thinking, okay, how do we get physical materials translated, right? Like handouts, just, in the Genesis class that you're in now, there's like 350 pages of notes that Sam produced for Genesis, and we're gonna have to probably spend money to get that translated. And there's just resource necessary. It's gonna be a big work. It's gonna take time, but you're the man for the job, dude.
Well, we're doing it, man. I mean, we do what we can, and I know as we make disciples of our own. God is going to provide more tools, but right now we got a group of 5 men that are working. I mean, I cannot take credit at all, but there's people, man, and I think eventually we will have a more mature content, more professional content. But we're getting there, and when I mean professional, I don't mean like nothing like super, but like it needs to be well done.
Right. Yeah. Getting it up to the standard of the school it takes a lot of work.
But it's a need, man. I can tell people want more, and that's my heart. I'm like, man, we're getting all these, and so that's what the urgency of doing more translations. So,
yeah. Well, man, we're thankful for you. So let's talk a little bit about reaching Latinos. Okay. Let's talk about, from salvation to discipleship. How do we go about reaching the Latinos in our community? And I do think people, a lot of Americans who love the Lord, who love the book, who love salvation, and they want to evangelize, are at a loss about how to reach Hispanics. There's communities, rural communities, full of migrant workers that are coming in and out, working in the factories in small towns. Obviously, the big cities are full of Latinos that are doing work in the city of all different professions, right? Like, I mean, it's not just migrant workers, it's not just immigrants. There's a lot of people that are here second and third generation that are college degrees. And so it's a very wide array of people. I think the first question I want to ask is, how does a church or a person who has a heart for Spanish speakers, how do they begin? How do they begin? How do they find the people in their community? How do they connect with them?
Yeah, it's very all about heart, and I think the question that you're asking is very fair. That's what probably everyone will ask, hey, how we can reach Latinos. But I will start maybe in the other side.
Yeah, please.
And I said, unless you have heart for people, and it is unless you have less of you and more of Jesus Christ, to view people for what they are, people, there's a need, then I think you can start dividing cultures, because yes, I think Latinos, African Americans, Europeans, even from Americans to European, I mean, there's a huge gap, right? Just in the way how they behave, etc. But I think the heart for people is what really matters, because you cannot have a heart for Latinos if you don't have a heart for people, and I think that's one of the things, I remember when I got hired at my job, somebody asked me, man, you're a good sales guy. And, so I do sales for a living.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And I refuse to take that. I'm like, no, I'm not a good salesman. And they're like, oh, no. I'm like, no, I just love to talk to people. And they're like, where'd that come from? I'm like, well, it's simple. If you know how to talk to people, if you like people, then you can share the gospel, you can close a deal,
Yeah.
you can make money,
Yeah.
you can disciple people. But the problem is, to your question, and for many that are listening to this, if you don't have a heart for the nations, a heart for the people, forget about having a key man and a key city and it doesn't matter.
Right.
You will never have victory reaching the nations unless you have a heart for people.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the church in 2022 is following. Man, I came here in 2005. I got married in 2006, 15 years married by the grace of God. And I had, and this probably, over 20 church jobs that probably I got offered by different churches in the United States. Everyone needs or want a Hispanic ministry.
Right.
But what I see is a church that look the same. Everyone has the same appearance, same color of skin. They're not open to integrate any culture.
Right.
And you either blacks, Hispanics, whites, or Asians, and there's segregation all over because there's no heart for people.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. When you read the book of Acts, and you see, man, there's people from multiple language, man. Yeah, you were teaching about Acts, just last year, and you see that there's a diverse audience always. So then you're like, okay, yeah. So I need to have a heart.
Yeah. What you're saying is a huge deal, is a big deal, because I do believe that it can be missions, or a mission mind, or a missions heart can be just rhetoric. Like, it can just be words that people say because they know that they're supposed to. And a lot of people are looking for maybe even a quick fix, in their gap in ministry. So, looking, if we just found the right Spanish speaking believer to lead the ministry, that would be, that would help us in this area. But then the people of the congregation don't have a vision or a heart themselves to do the outreach. It can't work that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So let me tell you this. So, I came for the first time, all 5. And I remember, man, even just the weather, I came on a transition from fall to winter. And man, I'm getting shocked by the weather. Like, oh my goodness, this is snow. Like, you can literally eat snow and stuff like that.
Had you never really seen much snow before? Or?
Well, when I live in Amsterdam, so I used to live in Amsterdam like a couple of years.
Yeah, there was some snow.
But it was different. Just living in the country now for a long time, and just the song gets late here, like it's 9 p.m. and you're like all these transitions and weather make hard for any international just be integrated with the church. What that means, like, if you don't have a heart to be sensitive, you're going to be hurting people. You're going to just knock people. Oh, why you're not here? Why you're not doing this? Well, hold on. I mean, this. I mean, it's not a wicked. It's just a weakness that the cultures bring to the United States, and God is bringing the nations here. But if we don't have a heart,
we won't be flexible. Correct. Yeah, and I like this point because it is a big deal, because one of the things that we run into with a lot of the Spanish speakers here in Kansas City that are wanting to be involved in your ministry, they desire to grow, is that the patterns of their life don't necessarily match up with the structure of our Sunday morning, Tuesday night discipleship Bible study routine. And so one of the things I've watched you do is that you have to kind of adapt your schedule outside of the common structure that we're used to as a ministry in order to meet with the people who actually do want to grow. And I mean, some of these people have 3 or 4 jobs that they're working, and Sunday morning might be difficult, or there's just different aspects, and you've got to find ways to meet them so that they can grow into the structure of our ministry.
Yeah, man. If you and you know me, I'm not the guy that is going to be late. I mean, when I wanna set up something, it is what it is. I have probably the less Latino culture of me that you can ever find, because I'm really more stick with schedules and things like that. But it is very difficult because you have to adjust to that, even on Sundays, man. And you know this, but like I feel like every Sunday that we open church, I have like 4 or 5 different audience, because the people that work today, is probably not working next Sunday, but then they have to work, and so you always have to be flexible and full of grace.
Yeah.
And again, that's when the heart have to take place. Having the desire to integrate any culture in your church is fine. The heart is the problem. Find the right heart. Yeah,
that's good. So when you have the right heart, we know that it affects your prayer life. And so talk about prayer. I mean, how should a person who's discovering, okay, I see this need, I have a heart for these people in my community, I don't know how to reach them yet. How do I begin? Just by asking the Lord to open those doors. What does that look like, maybe?
Yeah, no, man. It's, with the prayer part, I said, man, we need to start praying for God to do the work that He needs to do in our hearts, but also to have the right key person, because I think, and that probably takes us to your next point, but it's like, us only praying, without the action that we need to do, addressing the why we're praying, it just stay in words, And a lot of times people pray, but I remember coming into churches and like, I've been praying for someone, the ministry, the in our church, and I still get those calls, but I'm like, but then you do have the heart, to get there. Are you willing to take the actions, following with the prayers, I mean, I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think one of the things that you mentioned is maybe this idea that we should be praying for even just one soul, right? One person that's the key person in that moment. I think a lot of times we go fishing with the hope that, and I even saw you go through this early on in the ministry, is that if you just went to the people, that maybe 30 or 40 or 50 people would show up and they would just want it. But really it's looked more like investing in one man or one family, one at a time, a little at a time, right? And so this idea of having key people and just maybe an individual or a small group of people to focus on is a really good ambition and a good thing to be praying about. Lord, would you give me one Spanish-speaking soul? Yeah,
I remember, as a matter of fact, the first family, like functional family, they own a restaurant, and you're familiar with Los Tules, the restaurant. But I always came across of individuals, in the street or talking, doing evangelism, whatever. But I'm like, man, I think I'm just throwing, little popcorns all over the place, but I'm not getting anything. And I start praying for this family. They own a restaurant, and it wasn't a matter of 3 years, just having relationships until, the gospel came to their hearts, and they're like, oh, I don't even know that you were a pastor. I'm like, yes, because I don't want to be a pastor. I just want to be the person that love you. And then, man, after 3 years praying, they got saved. And as a result of this Bible study, relationship, there's been so many people who got saved and make decisions, and we're still meeting in that place. And
And so what you're saying is this family, who they're incredibly sweet. So shout out to the Tules family.
Yeah.
But they actually, once they got saved, they own this restaurant. They have all these Spanish-speaking employees. They open up their restaurant to actually, they close their restaurant down.
Close the restaurant.
Is it on Mondays?
Yeah,
is that
Mondays.
Right? They close their restaurant down in order to do Bible study, and they invite all their employees and their friends to come and participate. And in that way, they functioned as key people, because they were an access point to a broader community of Spanish-speaking people.
And all this start again with the heart, because it was very easy for me to get frustrated. I'm like, man, where are Los Tules? Where are all these people? Because I'm meeting with them, constantly, but then I don't get in the result in church, because I want people get into the church.
Yeah.
But again, if the heart is not in the right place, then what happens is very quick you get frustrated. Like, why they're not here? Why they're not showing? And then now, again, as a result of this, God has been full of grace, and we got multiple people. But
yeah, it's one of the things that you got to keep in mind. I think for a lot of folks is that these are people who came to America to work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. Like, and they may have generationally idolized the idea of working in the States. They're sending money back home to family members.
Correct.
They're storing money away to ensure that their kids can go to college.
And this is in general.
Yeah.
Like anyone.
Yeah. And so you're not just leading them to Christ, but it takes time to undo the idolatry that comes with that, right? They may be set free in Christ Jesus, but in terms of making a disciple, that's not always an easy thing, and it's going to take a lot of time.
And that's when LFBI come, man, because again, you can do so much, but you reach the point that like, okay, we need to do more investment. It have to be more meat now. I mean, you go to that diaper stage of life, but then you have to introduce something more. And again, everything required a heart, so, but praise God, man, it's just a privilege.
Yeah. So one of the things, just in terms of strategy wise, you mentioned this earlier, but immigrant communities tend to segregate themselves because when they're not working, they want to be with people who understand them, right? Like, so, in Kansas City, in an urban setting, there are particular neighborhoods where it's like almost all Spanish speakers.
Correct.
And probably a similar thing exists in rural communities too. Maybe you saw that when you were in Illinois, that that the Spanish-speaking people were in certain apartment complexes. Or
Correct.
How do you find Spanish speakers, right? Like say I want to go meet. I'm the average white guy at my church or whatever, and I want to go meet and find Spanish speakers, and in order to show them love, what are some of the places that I might go where Spanish speakers would frequent in order to come in contact with them and build relationships?
Yeah, well, usually stores. I mean, I think, there's a bunch of stores. I always say it's restaurants. There's the easy way when you go to eat. There's always someone in the back, doing something or serving food. But man, it's really everywhere. I mean, right now, and not only Latinos. Again, this is a gospel crisis that we have right now to just share all over. But you can find any people anywhere. But the thing is, you also have to have that key person, because unless you really can be able to communicate, I think you're going to lose those chances, That's why it's very critical to disciple people who can go to these areas, because again, not disrespect, but like you trying to go to a Mexican restaurant, for example, that is very typical. We love Mexican food, right? It's phenomenal.
It's my favorite.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you go without the language, without the lingo, you're like, oh, okay, you're going to lose that gap. Yep. So that's what MBT did. When I came, it was a key man in a key city and a key church, and we start from zero, reaching out to Latinos. But you definitely need that phonetic, just to go and reach out.
Yeah. So you're saying is if you're not fluent, that is a hurdle to people who don't speak good English. But if you're not fluent, reaching someone who is bilingual in the Spanish community would be a key objective. So someone who could bridge that gap for you,
correct,
that you could invest in, and then they become the key person to reach.
And it's what this church did to me. I remember just coming here, and you probably can testify this, but my English was not even close to what I do right now.
Yeah.
I was not, I go into meetings with you guys and I'm like, I'm going to battle, man, because I don't even know what you're talking about.
Right, it took time.
And then those jokes, and I'm not laughing, because then 10 minutes after, I'm like, oh, I'm laughing like,
Yeah.
So it takes time, but it took your investment in my life. It took Pastor Bess, Pastor Kenny, Pastor Chris, Andrew. Like, there's a mix of people investing, and not counting, obviously, the families around the church. Because I remember coming to the church, it was like, hundreds of people, I have been praying for you before you even came here. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That sounds so beautiful. So and now we get these families coming. So I think that's where the opportunity come for the church, having the right heart to like, okay, I identified that person in my church. And I think that's the hard part. When God give us families, you notice this very quick. You got your group, because our church have classes or groups of people. But I think where we're lacking is, how do I separate one Sunday every 3 months to hang out with someone that is not from this country, and I'm going to, probably be exposed to weird phonetics, weird language, So how can I do that for my church, for the sake of the kingdom,
Yeah.
And I think that's where the church need to get better. It's just, how can I be intentional getting with someone that is not fluent?
Yeah, it makes me think a little bit, in Corinth, they had a cultural problem because the church was so diverse in its background that there were issues in the church that were cultural that could create division if those gaps weren't bridged. And I think that's true in our church too. Like, I think people need to be willing to open up their home to people that are different from them, just for the sake of doing it, just for the sake of expressing love and friendship, and that there's a kindred thing we share in the gospel, even if we don't share the same language or culture or taste in food. Let's take time together to just function as a family and show our love for each other. That does so much in terms of unifying the body and helping people to be propelled forward when maybe they're young in the Lord or weak. And
one of the easy ways, Pastor Briscoe, our church have Friends of International, and we got these welcome parties.
Yeah, the international ministry here.
Man, that's an easy training for everybody. But again, I also believe that our class, our Hispanic class, is also international. There's so many countries, and I think picking just a family is just like a small training. I want to invite someone for the Hispanic class. And if you're listening, I think you have to take this serious, because you have a pastor in your church that also spend time with white people a lot, and I love it. But with black, my friends are all over, and if I can do that, man, I think anyone can do it for the sake of Jesus Christ. For
sure. So reaching Latinos has its own specific, hurdles, difficulties, and one of them is the immigration thing. So like, you might invest in someone for a year or two, and then they get deported, and so there's the legal aspect of that. Share with us, because I think this is a common question that pastors and leaders have about the Spanish speakers in their congregation, is what should the philosophy and approach be to someone who's in the U.S. illegally, but you might be reaching them, and they might be hearing the gospel, and they might be hungry for it. What kind of approach do you take with that?
So I take the approach of opportunity. Is the international ministry, the Hispanic ministries, call it however you want, is a ministry based on opportunities. It's just the greatest opportunity that God is bringing to your lap to just exercise the ministry of reconciliation. That's simple. It is heartbreaker, because I remember since I have been here, I probably I was talking to our leaders in our class, probably over 200 people, bro, coming. And then you hear the one is gone, and then the other one is gone. Somebody got deported because of whatever reason. And it breaks your heart big time. It's just, again, you just have to get focused, and like, okay, I might don't get what I want. Maybe it's not the member number 100. Oh, I got 100. Woohoo! No, but maybe it's just to use the opportunity.
Yeah.
I still meet with a guy that was deported last year, and he is in Honduras right now. He still texted me. He called me about the Bible. He has questions. He follow us through media, and and praise God for that. It broke my heart, that he was taken, and there was some context there, and but again, you have to see it as an opportunity. Because yes, God will put in your lap people, with maybe they came illegally, maybe they came with the right way, whatever the case is, and they go, and it breaks your heart. But again, it's still an opportunity. It's still an opportunity to see that. Revelation 7, you want to hear everyone in front of the Lord singing, praising God in different tones, and that's the approach. Is how can I squeeze one more? Kind of like, But I mean, I don't know if that answered.
No, it does, and I think too, bridging the dialogue over that. It's not something you ever bring up with folks that you even suspect are illegal. It's not something that you converse about. You just let the word of the Lord work on the hearts of people, and they'll get the conviction that they need, whether or not to stay in the U.S. or to go home. Your job is to disciipel them and let God do the rest. And
some people take the decision that, hey, I think I need to go back and tell and just going back to the family from Mexico, the Los Tules, they took a trip to Mexico just to share the gospel to everybody. Like, this is how on fire this family is. And I'm so humble because I'm like, I want to take a vacation just to be in front of the beach, man, or something like that. But they literally took a trip just to go and share the gospel with everybody. And then so this is the syndrome here. He also flew everyone. And I remember that night, man, it was like 20 plus people in their living room. We're having our normal Bible study. And every single soul was crying, desperate to receive the Lord, their Savior. I mean, unfortunately, they cannot stay because they have to go back. But it was very emotional, man. But again, it took just time, and it's a heartbreaker because then you don't see them again. Then I getting calls from Mexico, just like, hey, what do I do here? I'm getting married. Can you? And then it's just heartbreaker. But then now that they met the Lord. Yeah. So again, it's an opportunity, man. That we all have to take, and quite frankly, I think we are immigrants, everybody. So it's just God gave us an opportunity just to be here today, and opportunities are all over the place.
And one of the things that you mentioned is that the people are reaching back to you saying, "Can you help me with such and such question I have, or how do I get plugged into a church that's right for me?" And these types of questions that the assets that Living Faith Fellowship and LFBI have are actually critical. Those are, we talk about key tools. These are key tools that we want to get in the hands of people in other countries. We want to send them back with the tools necessary to continue their growth. And this is why LFBI is such a big deal. But also, like, you translated 52 Weeks, the Mark Trotter devotional material and that commentary. And it's an asset that we've got to get. We've got to get, we're in the stages of getting that out. And there's tools like that are critical. Keys of Bible study, our premarital material. We've got the discipleship material that we've now finished. Like, all those tools become very, very important in order to support the people that we are beginning to reach.
Yeah. And man, in that point, I will say this, if you're listening at home and maybe you have something extra that you can invest, in terms of money or offering whatever, but the need is out there, man. There's so much benefits by just, maybe it's that someone is not participating in LFBI, but there's a way to just volunteer helping, with something, so then this can be profitable eventually for somebody, just think about it. I was having a debate the other day with the whole thing with the King James and, the Spanish Bible, and we were talking about that stuff. And it's like, people have no clue in America what they have, like if you see the commentaries, the books, I mean, they're so profitable, man. And when you go to Spanish, man, I think we're lacking a lot of that stuff. Quite frankly, my country, Costa Rica, where I born, was reached, gospelized by American people. And by the grace of God, people who spend time, spend money translating and doing a hard work for a culture that doesn't even have access to, so going back to the LFBI thing, there's an opportunity, man. If someone is listening and they're like, man, I can volunteer maybe with some finances, like maybe this is something that I can invest.
Sure.
Not only for Spanish, man, because as you mentioned earlier, we're talking now about Vietnamese, Pastor Juan is about to take off, and then, but there's a lot of tools that we can keep translating just for the sake of the kingdom,
Yeah. We're going to pause right here for just a second so we can hear from one of our students from the Living Faith Bible Institute.
My name is Andrew Ong. I'm a pastor here at Midtown Baptist Temple, and I'm also a graduate of Living Faith Bible Institute. So I would first preface to say that nothing substitute, disciple-making local church. What LFBI would add to that is that knowledge piece that is so vital, in this world, because there is so many false doctrine all over the place, and so to be equipped in LFBI has helped me to filter through a lot of the noise in Christianity and a lot of different false doctrine, if you will, and know what is the Bible saying about this matter. In terms of ministry, it has definitely prepared me to be a better minister, to be a better preacher, to be more well-versed with my Bible. And so I would highly recommend if you are someone who is looking for a very high quality school to learn the Bible, I cannot recommend enough Living Faith Bible Institute.
If that interests you at all, please visit lfbi.org and consider enrolling in classes to make the Bible Institute inexpensive or cost effective. Because, the other thing is people, America is the, per home, the richest country in the world. I think the average home in America brings in $176,000 a year, I think, is the actual statistic, is the actual number. And when you start looking at Mexico, I think it's 15,000. A home brings in 15,000 a year is the average in Mexico, is what I've read. And so in Latin America, financially, it's just it's a drastically different world, and people can't afford seminary.
Correct.
Right? They can't afford an American seminary or American education. But if there's a way for people to donate to support LFBI, so now we have the liberty to offer scholarships to students in all over Latin America, which they're coming in. We've only just begun this work, and we've already got
60 millions of just Latinos in this country.
Yeah, in this country.
It's insane.
It is insane. And we've got to, on our end, we know what we're responsible for, and we've got to do our part in making sure that they get the content that will help grow them, because we need them to go plant churches all over Latin America, because they're going to be the best ones to do that.
Yes, correct. That's just that prayer, man, for the key people that we need to train and just make sure that we're sending. Because, obviously, it's not a work of one person, just to talk about the 52 weeks of Mark Trotter, I was not the one that did all that work. It was somebody else. And we work it out together, but I did pretty much none, I was doing something else. But again, it was the investment on someone.
Yeah.
And, so
it's a team effort.
Correct. Yeah. And that's what we're praying right now, man. There's more classes that we want to put up front in the next 2 years. So hopefully I can enable myself to do a little bit more too. That's my heart. But for now, I also have to work and praise God. But that's our heart. That's the heart of MBT, the LFBI, just to translate more, so then people can have more access and we can see more Latinos. Yeah. Absolutely. And people from all the nations,
Yeah,
definitely.
of course. Yeah. Of course. Will, man, I love your heart.
Man.
Thanks for being my friend.
Oh, likewise, man.
It's so good. It's so good for me to have you in my life, and getting to sit like this and talk is good, because I want people to know your heart for ministry. I want them to hear that, but I also want them to get the methods, the strategies necessary. I want them to be able to envision in their mind a little bit what it might look like to reach some key people in their town and their city, so that work towards the Spanish speakers can grow.
Yeah, no, it's start praying, man. I think that's just the first step, man. I think sometimes we want integrate something in our church and we're not praying, and I know for a fact this church was praying. Like I saw it across border, coming here, there was multiple people always, man, I have been praying for you. And I'm like, how come you're praying for me if you don't even know me? Yeah, because we have been praying that's one of the first steps. And I think, just exposing the church to maybe someone, maybe is a matter of us sending someone for like a week or something, but praying, for God changing the heart of the church, praying for that key man, and just to start, integrating even LFBI. I'm getting calls now from other churches that have Hispanics or Latinos, and I think that's a good way, just, praying and then start, talking and just doing more, man. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Will, love you, dude.
Yeah.
Thank you for hanging out with me.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you for hanging out with us for this episode of the Postscript. And if you are a Spanish speaker, maybe Spanish is your native language, it's your heart language, and you are looking to get training, or people who are looking to get training, and you can connect them to LFBI. Again, we are slowly developing this curriculum. We've started with the foundations courses 2 and 3. We refer to them as Fundaciones 2 and 3. And how was that? Did that sound right?
Oh, that was
good?
perfect, man.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And that's where we started. We're also working towards translating Genesis and Romans a little at a time, and we want to invite people to join us for those classes. And we also want to invite those of you who are interested in supporting this work of translating the content. You're hearing for the first time that how onerous this work can actually be. If you're interested in helping, we want to invite you to support us through prayer. If you've got the ability to translate, you can reach out to Pastor Will. But if you have the finances necessary and you're looking to give to a project like this, we want to invite you also to consider giving to LFBI. You can do that through lfbi.org. But with all that said, we want to just challenge you one more time. Reach people that aren't like you. In your neighborhood, in your community, in your school, in your workplace, reach people who don't look or act or behave the way you do, places from all over the world. Go and learn how to love people like that, because that is the heart of Jesus Christ. We love you, and we're grateful for the time you've spent with us today, and we hope to see you again next week for another episode of The Postscript. God bless. Thanks for listening to The Postscript. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a rating and review in order to help other people find our podcast. If you value this show, please help us continue creating content by supporting Living Faith Bible Institute at lfbi.org/support.